Salams from the People's Dispatch Studios here in New Delhi. I'm Siddhant Ani and you're watching Daily Debrief. On the show today, we're talking about Israel and Turkey resuming full diplomatic relations, record inflation rate in the United Kingdom, and how the US and its allies are perhaps creating another flashpoint in East Asia. First up, as I was just mentioning, Turkey and Israel have announced an agreement to restore full diplomatic relations, meaning that ambassadors and consuls general will be appointed by each of the governments, a move that can be seen as the culmination of a gradual improvement in relations over the years. This is, of course, based very much on factors at play in domestic politics and proximity to elections in both countries. The announcement came on Wednesday after Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had a conversation. Prior to this, Israel's President Isaac Herzog also visited Turkey and foreign minister level talks were held. Ties were broken 4 years ago over the killing, or one of the reasons stated at least, was the killing of 60 Palestinians by Israeli forces during protests on the Gaza border against the opening of the United States' embassy in Jerusalem. Abdul spoke to me earlier via video conference to outline the political and economic factors at play. Abdul, welcome back to Daily Debrief, your favorite show, I think, on the entire internet. First up, how are we looking at this normalization of ties between Israel and Turkey, Abdul?
I think this is the larger part of what Turkey is basically trying to do for last few months at least. Erdogan went to Saudi Arabia, quote unquote, amended his Turkey's relationship with that. Then he also tried to amend relationship with UAE, then Egypt. With some countries it went well, but with some, of course, it will take more time. Erdogan has to face elections next year, and Israel is seen as one of those regional countries which has potential to invest in Turkey. Israel-Turkey relationship is nothing new. It is quite old, one of the few countries in the region which has recognized Israelis since the beginning. And only in the last few years, there were problems in the relationship. Otherwise, it was quite a normal relationship. So I think this is an attempt to kind of go back to the original ways the relationship worked between both the countries. Apart from that, it is also should be seen because Turkey is also trying to kind of get back to its relationship with US, because we have seen that how the relationship between both the countries went bad during Trump administration, and even after Biden's coming to power, it has not improved much. Bending a relationship with Israel will help Turkey to kind of get back to US in much better way. So we should see it primarily from the Turkish side as an attempt to its larger regional strategy. From Israeli side, of course, Israel is trying to kind of embed itself in the region much more intensively. Abraham Accord, we have seen how it signed a normalization with UAE and other countries in the region. And it is also election season. In October and November, there will be elections in Israel, and the caretaker prime minister has to kind of show some development in front of the foreign policy as well. And in that way, they tried very hard to come closer to Turkey, and they trying to brush over all the differences which had emerged in last decade and so. And I think we should see it from this mutual interest point of view.
Right. One of those key differences, Abdul, that you were mentioning is, of course, on the issue of Palestine, and when diplomatic relations were broken off, it was in the wake of Israeli airstrikes against Gaza that killed 60-odd people, and this normalization comes very soon after similar strikes on the Gaza Strip, where a very similar number of people have once again been killed. Yet Turkey is taking the stand that this should not be interpreted as sort of giving up on or not showing solidarity with Palestine. So how can these two things be viewed in the same sort of sentence or paragraph?
Well, Palestine, as in the case of some Gulf countries and most of other regional Arab countries, comes what we generally call as afterthought, where primarily their own quote unquote national interest. On the basis of that, they try to, of course, justify to get legitimacy as a legitimate player in the region. You have to show your commitment at least verbally. So it has come down to, it has reduced to just a verbal commitment to the Palestinian cause, just like, lip service. Turkey, anyway, unlike other Arab countries, never had a clear-cut stand that until there is a two-state solution, we will not develop relationship. As I said before, Turkey has a diplomatic relationship with Israel since the beginning. The relationship between Israel and Turkey went bad. There are some ideological elements, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, the support of Turkey extended to Hamas, and so on and so forth. That is, of course, is a reason that a part of the reason that the relationship deteriorated in last decade. But we should not forget that even after 2010 attacks on Mavi Marmara, Turkey resumed its relationship by 2016. Within 6 years, everything was normal. It was only after, as you rightly pointed out, during the Great March of Return protests, when, but I think that is also an excuse, because that basically was a larger part of Erdogan's plan to kind of put himself as the leader of the region. And therefore, it used Palestinian cause as a symbol to portray its greater role in the region. Apart from that, it is so that I think Erdogan has realized that that particular effort is not working. It is not worth it for Turkey's own quote unquote interests, and therefore it has come back to square one, and it has gone back to the original Turkish position on Israel.
All right. Thank you very much, Abdul, for putting all of that in perspective for us today. The United Kingdom's rate of inflation jumped over the double-digit mark for the one-year period leading up to July 2022. This is the first time double-digit annual inflation has been recorded in over 40 years in that country. The price of bread, cereals, milk, cheese and eggs rose the fastest, while the cost of vegetables, meat and even chocolate are much higher. Energy costs have, of course, gone up significantly across the board, impacting both homes as well as small and medium businesses. Coupled with the ongoing leadership crisis in the ruling Conservative Party, these latest figures from the Office for National Statistics highlight the cost of living crisis that is impacting seriously as much as 2/3 of the United Kingdom's population, as well as the challenge that lies ahead for both the central bank and those responsible for economic policy. Anish joins us now for more on what is happening in the United Kingdom. Anish, the first of the two stories we're talking to you about today is the escalating cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom. We've touched on it before on Daily Debrief in various contexts of what's been going on in the United Kingdom politically as well as economically. But now those figures officially exceeding what even economists had predicted. Double digits, 10.1 up until in the year leading up to July, we now know. Like I was mentioning earlier in the link to this conversation, that all this basket of essential goods heavily up in prices. What are the specific circumstances in the UK where we're seeing this sort of, the other big G7 countries haven't seen this kind of inflation? What exactly is going on in the UK?
Yes, so this is something that is happening like once in a generation, like, because we have seen that this is the highest inflation rates since the initial Thatcher years. At least in the case of the Thatcher years, there was a shock therapy kind of policies that were adopted under her administration, which is not the case right now. So this is something that is just a gross mismanagement that is also happening in the middle of a political crisis of the conservative government's leadership crisis that we're talking about, that we have also spoken about earlier. So this puts a huge burden on a large majority of British people, especially the working class. Certain estimates say that anything up to 45 million people could be pushed to poverty levels, like poverty levels where they they might have to cut back on a whole lot of consumption, and that is a major problem because 45 million is something close to 2/3 of the population already. So this is definitely an alarming situation. A bigger problem with that, obviously, the reason why that is happening is because inflation rates are escalating so high, but wages are not going up anywhere near that rate. And this is definitely, and obviously with the inflation price, the real wages are all obviously going down. In real terms, people are earning lesser and lesser by the day, especially the minimum wage, lower and working class people. So this is going to be affecting them the worst. We are looking at a situation where already there are surveys that where British people have been talking about skipping meals already in the past month to conserve money, to conserve their resources. They're also skipping on heating supplies and so on. And with the winter coming in, that is going to be even more difficult for them to handle. So in an overall sense, we're looking at a crisis that is much deeper than it shows, because if you look at the 10.1% is obviously a high number, but on the ground, it is going to be even worse if you look at how it affects everybody's consumption pattern, how it is going to affect everybody's buying pattern, and how it is going to affect everybody's incomes, definitely. So the impact will be much greater. The multiplier effect of that will be even greater to the GDP and the economy at large. And this is obviously one of the worst case scenarios that is happening in the Western world, and UK is not the first country to actually face a global supply chain crisis, but it is not the best at handling the situation clearly.
Yeah. You were mentioning the political crisis, and it's an ongoing crisis. In that sense, it has come up politically, at least full circle from Thatcher to Johnson. Whether it's his outgoing government, but someone comes in to replace this government, Anish, sometime soon. Not an easy task for them to handle, with the Bank of England saying this could rise to as much as 13% in the near future. So, what is the plan essentially?
I mean, at this point, because this is a government waiting to leave, there is no plan from their side. Specifically, what we have is very short-term and very bare minimum being done by the government. But on the other hand, the two candidates that we're looking at, who might be the incoming prime ministers of the country, they're not giving any great set of ideas either. On the one hand, we have a person who, embraces the shock therapy treatment, who wants more neoliberalism, and she's pretty much as a new Thatcher in the making for the 21st century. On the other hand, we have another Johnson kind of continuation possible in the form of Rishi Sunak. So in both these cases, the working class people are not really at the best do not really have the best options right now. Obviously, it is not their choice either, because it's something that the Conservative Party is deciding among itself, and this is not a popular election, as we know. But in the sense, in the greater scheme of things, it is going to definitely affect all the 65 million people in the United Kingdom. And the policies the plans that they're coming up with are also very short term. We are talking about just very small term reduction in, say, or hike in corporate tax on one hand, or maybe say reduction in certain kind of controls that are put in place in regulating certain prices. But in the long term, obviously, this is going to affect everybody. We are obviously looking at an anti-labor, anti-union kind of candidate on one side, and on the other side, we are also looking at somebody who's going to shift the blame to just the international price rise and supply chain issues. So this is not really the best of times, and we have to wait another month to see if there is going to be a plan coming up. But the need right now is for a very emergency but a comprehensive plan that can actually take care of not only the supply chain problems, the global supply chain problems, but also the upcoming issue of demand crisis that can happen, because higher inflation, lower real wages means that people are going to consume less. And that in general is going to be the worst thing that an economy can go through, especially an advanced economy like the United Kingdom, where you do not have much scope for growth in the long run, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at a stable growth level, but not a high growth level.
High growth rate.
So for them to not come up with something that can stem or arrest any kind of demand side problems is going to be a disaster in the long run. So this is something that we really need to look out for in the coming months.
Right. Thanks, Anish. Stick around because we are coming back to you in a minute to talk about what's going on the Korean Peninsula. And finally, Washington and Seoul on Wednesday have told the world that they will expand joint military exercises and deepen security cooperation with Japan, further escalating tensions in a region already on tenterhooks. The two sides are also mulling the deployment of US nuclear strategic assets. Simultaneously, President Yoon Suk-yeol of South Korea completed 100 days in office and said that his government has no plans to pursue its own nuclear deterrent and called instead for more diplomacy, while also suggesting willingness to provide phased economic aid to North Korea in exchange, of course, for some kind of demilitarization plan and work towards a lasting peace. Anish is still with us to decipher some of this mixed signaling. Anish, these drills, South Korea and the US, of course, have a very close military relationship, and drills are not new. What exactly is going to take place in the context of the region, and what is happening there right now?
Yeah, so obviously the drills are not new. This is a very biannual thing, and it has happened since 2012 at least. But under the previous administration of President Moon Jae-in, you had these drills being limited. The scale of it was being brought down, and even the publicity that it attracted, the manner in which it was promoted was also quite limited. So the whole point was to facilitate a peace process with North Korea, and that was one of the biggest priorities of the Moon administration. But we saw during the campaign, and that is something that he is already delivering in the first 100 days of his administration. We are looking at a very conservative president in Yoon Suk-yeol, who opposed the peace process, the manner in which it took shape under the Moon administration. But what kind of peace process he wants to further is also not very clear. But if you look at the drills right now, the whole point is to bring it back to the scale that it used to be under the previous conservative government. And we're looking at thousands of soldiers participating. They were not just like a few thousands, but tens of thousands of soldiers from both sides. And we already saw anti-missile drill happening in Hawaii last week. So this is an expanded scope of military drills, and it only signals to a very closely building or rebuilding relationship between South Korea and the United States. And that has its own problems, because this means that the already a peace process that has been put on the back burner is now threatened because of these actions. On the one hand, obviously, President Yoon is talking about calls or making calls for peace talks with the North. But on the other hand, these are the kind of actions that he is pursuing, despite protests at home, despite a large number of people in South Korea opposing such provocations that can actually put peace under threat in the peninsula.
Their lives at risk, obviously, by doing that. Yeah, you were mentioning the theater high altitude anti missile air defense system that of the US that covers this region. It's a sticking point, not just for the entire region. And these drills are also happening in the context of heightened US military cooperation with Japan, with Korea, of course, and the Quad countries, as we've talked about before. So what are the implications on the region, on East Asia?
Yes, so at this point, one of the I think the lasting legacies of the Biden administration would be to create many flashpoints in the East Asian region. We obviously Trump administration had its run-ins with China, but we didn't have that many like very orchestrated creation of flashpoints of conflict and tension. We already saw what happened with Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and how it only escalated the whole situation in the region, which is not known for wars since 1940s, or wars or any kind of armed conflict since the 1940s, but 50s at least. But right now, that is something that is threatened. And despite the kind of tensions that that is very clearly visible, very obvious to the whole world, you still have such military cooperations happening. And this is despite countries in the region trying to have talks with each other. We already saw China approaching the South Korean government, and right now having talks with the Japanese government on the Taiwan issue and the crisis that has precipitated since the US speaker's visit. But again, this expanded military drills only signals the fact that South Korea is going to be more militarily aligned with the United States. And that is also not something that China will be comfortable with. And it is obviously, as you said, it is not just, but also the entire region as well. And this can actually have an impact because we are looking at a more polarized set of blocks being created in the region, and that can actually affect how the Indo-Pacific region shapes up in the coming years. It is not a heartening situation, let's be very honest. We are looking at no attempt, at least on the pro-US side, to actually make any kind of take any kind of meaningful actions that will de-escalate situations, apart from statements that are quite empty and without any plan. And that only provokes more provocations from, say, China and countries like China and North Korea. And this, we already saw North Korea, a very publicized set of missile tests being conducted by it very recently. And so that obviously is going to just keep escalating situations until both sides sit down, talk, and really just put their hearts into creating a roadmap for peace that can keep the region stable and that can be more long-term and more sustainable. But that is also not happening. So obviously, situation does not look good. We are not definitely looking at a war on the horizon, but we're seeing flashpoints of tensions being created all over the place. And that is really just not the situation that we need in that region, which houses like some major military powers already.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for that update, Anish. That's all we have on this episode of Daily Debrief. From Anish, myself, and the entire team here at People's Dispatch, thanks very much for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow with another episode, same time, same place. Until then, give us visit our website for more details, of course, peoplesdispatch.org, and give us a follow on the social media platform of your choice for updates. Thanks again. Goodbye.